You're listening to the When Life Hands You Lemons podcast.
But in an entry-level film production, it's one strike and you're out. You're fired. I'm not calling you back.
If your goal today is to make a basket, we're gonna make that basket.
The minute you create something, as soon as it's made tangible, you have a copyright in it.
How do I get our guys to sound that big, that full when they do the harmonies?
And I'm your host, Lennon Seahawk. Let's get to the show. Hello and welcome to When Life Hands You Lemons. I apologize for the delay in episodes over the last couple weeks. I went through a move about a month ago and took a little bit of a break to focus on getting settled and organized and getting new furniture. I mean, I've made more IKEA runs and Target runs than I care to admit to. But I am back and I have a lot of really great guests planned and lined up for the show. So stay tuned. Make sure you're signed up for my email list. Check out the website and all that fun stuff. Follow me on Instagram. Before I dive into this week's episode, I want to mention that this is my first ever video podcast. So if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or another platform that doesn't support video, head over to my YouTube channel and you can watch this conversation instead of just listen to it. It might be a little bit more interesting. Before I dive in, I want to give a brief introduction to DJ Swivel. He is a fellow Full Sail alumni. He graduated in 2005 and was inducted into the Full Sail Hall of Fame in 2015. And funny enough, I was actually a student at Full Sail during that time. So I watched him get inducted into the Hall of Fame, which is really cool. And to say that I have him on my podcast and chatting with him for about an hour is absolutely an honor. So I don't want to give away too much, but just a brief overview is that he has worked with artists like Beyonce, BTS, Jay-Z, Jay Sean, the Chainsmokers, and a slew of others. And he tells his story in this episode of how he got to where he's at. We talk about his plug-in business that he recently started. We talk about staying sane and healthy and creative during quarantine and all this stuff. And towards the end, we have a little bit of a conversation about steaks. So please stay tuned for this episode and listen through it. I would love to hear your feedback on it. Please leave a comment on YouTube. Be sure to leave me a 5-star rating and or review on Apple Podcasts. It greatly helps boost the show and help it be discovered by others. Please sign up for my mailing list, which you can find on my website or in the link below. And I would also appreciate it if you would follow me on Instagram. And if you or somebody you know would be a good guest for the show, please fill out the guest request form that is also linked below, and I will reach out if you or the guest is a good fit. So without further ado, let's dive in to my conversation with the amazing, talented DJ Swivel. First of all, how you doing? How's things hanging in there with
Very
quarantine?
well, grinding through this awkward time, I guess. But for me, actually, it's been a little... not a whole lot different because I'm sure you've talked to other producers and we kind of just live in the house anyway. So
Yep.
It's not that different than it was a year ago, but managing.
Yeah. Are you in Los Angeles or New York or where are you at?
I'm in LA now. I started my career in New York 15 years ago or so, but I've been in LA since 2015, so about 5 years.
Great. Yeah. You're a Full Sail alumni. I am as well. What's
your graduation year?
2016. So I was actually there when you got inducted into the Hall of Fame.
Oh, no way.
So,
awesome.
yeah,
well,
I was there.
I love that. That's like a nice little full circle moment.
Yeah, that's why I was like, when I got hit up by the publicist, and I'm like, oh my gosh, DJ Swivel. I mean, you've been on my list for a while to get you on the show, but I'm like, he's a Full Sail alumni. I love having Full Sail alumni. It's always nice to connect with them, and especially with what you're doing out there. So this is great. I'm so thankful that we were able to do this.
Awesome. Yeah, me too.
Yeah. So I've got all kinds of stuff for you. I just want to touch base and just, you're out in Los Angeles. Things are obviously crazy right now. Can you talk about how, even if anything has shifted a little bit for you, like what is your typical routine versus what you're doing now?
Well, I feel like I'm a bit of a unique sort of example in music in that I've never been 100% focused on the creative. It's always like kind of been, well, maybe early in my career it was 100% focused on creative. But for at least the last 5 years or so, it's been basically 50% business, 50% creative. And so my studio's in my house. I'm in my own home here. And typically I'll wake up and if there is a song to mix or a record I need to finish on the production side, or I'm doing a writing session, I'll do sort of a creative day. But I'm also juggling like my plugin business, and now I'm doing some YouTube stuff, and I have a magazine, and I have a tech platform, Skio. And so there's always something that I have to do with that. And so it's actually become a little overwhelming, just the amount of, my brain has to just shift gears all day pretty much, because every email that comes in is like completely unrelated to the next often times. So, for me, like it hasn't been a huge shift, but because I've done basically no in-person sessions since this started, maybe one or two, but certainly not often. It's given me time to focus a lot on the plugin side of things and building up the momentum there. I mean, the first product I did dropped in January, so it's still fairly new to me. And I know in order to do it well, I need to dedicate a fairly significant amount of time to it. So that it's been good for that. I've really just, focused in and been just dialing in all of that stuff, doing whether it's bug fixing or now I have 2 new products I'm building, just focus on product side.
So you're juggling so much. How do you manage to keep everything organized? Like if you're working on, like I've been following you for a while as well. So I know you do Skio, and then you just started doing the sauce. You launched your plugin. So like how do you, if you're working on the sauce, how do you stay focused on the sauce and get what you're accomplished? Because you've got so many things going on. Like how do you stay focused?
I wish I had a good answer for that. The truth of the matter is, I have a fairly good memory, and somehow I just get it all done. But it's funny, Jason, who's here with me, and he's starting to handle more of the operation side of my business. It's a constant struggle of like, downloading everything in my head into somebody else so that they can take some of the pressure off of the day-to-day of what I'm doing. Because largely I've built everything kind of by myself. I've never really been managed. I've never really had a staff around me. So it's always just been long days and no weekends off and just constantly working. Even if I'm away on vacation, I still make sure I have my phone or my laptop and whatever. So, it's a challenge, and it's a constant challenge, and I don't have a great answer to it. I'm still learning how to juggle everything, and especially as I put more on my plate. One thing I'll say is I've gotten very good at being efficient, very good at making sure to get to a result, it requires the absolute least amount of time to get to a result that doesn't sacrifice quality or what I deem to be a necessary bar. But aside from that, I'm still learning. I'm still trying to figure it out.
So you have a magazine. It's called, is it Headline or Headliner?
Headliner, yeah.
Okay, what was the purpose behind that? Because you don't really have a lot of experience in like journalism, right? You're mostly focused on it. Or what's kind of the inspiration behind that?
My mom was a news anchor, so
that's right.
I certainly picked up some stuff from her, and also I've always written, so I've always just written things. Whether it's, it could be anything. I've just always liked writing. And I found that the magazine was a good outlet for that. But I do have to say, I didn't start it by myself. In fact, it was a journalist who I had done some stories with over the years. And he approached me and said, "Hey, I have this idea to start a magazine and I would love for you to be involved. I've loved our conversations and I feel like there's a lot that you can add to this." And so admittedly, it's a very, very small portion of my life. And in fact, for the last few years, it's been almost nothing. But obviously it's still, the team over in the UK, Paul, who's the editor and started the magazine, he's got a good handle on everything. But it's just one of those, like, added things that's like sort of on the side that I manage. I also have a studio up in the Hollywood Hills, and sort of my time that I dedicate to that is somewhat limited, but you know, I'm able to keep it booked and keep clients in there largely because of the things I'm doing on the music side. So the one thing I'll say is everything I do is sort of interconnected. So I don't really take on anything that is living on an island somewhere. Everything I take on has to reinforce something else I'm doing. So if I didn't feel the YouTube stuff that I'm starting to build was going to reinforce my plugin business or reinforce my personal music business just in elevating my brand, I probably wouldn't have taken on the added workload.
Sure, because I'm sure you don't need any more work than you already got.
Oh yeah. The problem is I have a new every week I have a new idea, and a lot of them are good and I want to do them, but now I have to really just sort of filter through and figure out what is most appropriate. What is the most appropriate way to spend my time?
Yeah. That's kind of like me. You know, I've got so many things going on that I want to do and try and dabble in and learn. And it's just like, if it's not contributing to what I want to do or my goals, it's like, I got to start cutting it. Yeah. And I've started doing, even with the podcast here, it was sucking up so much of my time. And I'm just like, I got other music, I'm a musician myself, so I want to work on music and stuff. So it's like, if I want to focus more on music, I got to cut some podcast stuff. And I'm a journalist as well, so I had to cut some publications that I wrote for, and just the time it was. So I completely understand. So it's one of those things.
What I'm dealing with.
Yes, I completely understand what you're dealing with. So
but you know what? I will say it's a good problem to have, because what it means is that you're constantly focused on like achieving goals, moving the bar, achieving new goals, pushing the bar back a little bit more. And so I think that is a good recipe for success. If you can manage the workload and the time, and it's a lot of effort and energy. But that type of personality, I find typically leads to somebody who becomes successful. So you're on the right track.
That's good. That's good to hear. Yeah. So you started your plugin company. I want to dig into that a little bit, and then we'll get into your YouTube series and stuff, because that's interesting as well.
Sure.
So the sauce, explain what it is for those who haven't heard of it, and then tell us what was the purpose behind it. Why did you create it?
Sure. So the sauce is, I call it a vocal seasoner. It's a multi-effects tool. It's not just for vocals. It works on basses and drums and everything. It has basically, I want to say 8 different effects on it. I'd have to count them all, maybe 9. But there's pitch and formant shifting. There's a couple different distortions, saturation. There's a flanger. There's a chorus. There's a stereo imager. There's a reverb, a delay, and a compressor. And then all of those things function on a multi-band level. So you can actually independently change the pitch or formant shift or reverb level or amount or type for each frequency band. So it's actually a fairly powerful tool. And the way that I started it was, well, just being the ambitious person that I am. I looked at other plugin brands, and I saw some white space, a gap in the market for a producer-driven brand that is started by a producer or engineer, and brought to the customer from that engineer, not partnering with other brands. And then aside from that, you know, I'm 35 years old now, and the reality is in pop music, which is where most of my work resides, there is a shelf life. Now, not to say that you can't be 60 years old and making great pop music, you probably can, but that's sort of the exception to the rule. Most of the driving force between the creative innovation that happens in music, I find is I'm not sure how old you are, but if you graduated in 2016, I'm going to say probably 23 or 4. 24. So, it's you guys who are driving the creative innovation largely. And so now, thankfully, I still am busy, and I still get lots of calls, and I still work on a lot of music. But one of these days, those calls will slow down, and my love for music won't change. And so I thought plugins would be a good area to get into that would allow me to continue to leave an impact on the industry. And if I can build plugins and products that are creatively interesting, then a new generation of producers are going to be able to use those tools to innovate their music. And so that gives me a lot of pleasure. And then aside from that, just from a purely business perspective, you know, my mixing or producing or songwriting there's a fixed ceiling of time that I can dedicate towards that. And so you're sort of bandwidth limited. Whereas when you build a product driven business, you can be sleeping and still selling product. And so it's a more, like I said, going back to the earlier thing, I try to be as efficient as possible. And so that's an efficient way to continue to grow and build my business, where it's not occupying, a significantly higher amount of my time. So
That's interesting that you say that the pop music, quote unquote, has a shelf life, because you never really think about it like that. You're like, oh, because you're very successful and you're like kind of at the top of your game, and you have been for the last 10 years. And now that I'm thinking about it, even artists have a shelf life. I'm thinking of the artists the bands like NSYNC, Backstreet Boys, Kesha, even Katy Perry, the artists that I kind of grew up on, Britney Spears. They're all kind of like non-existent now. Like Britney Spears has gone off her rocker and is, she's creating weird TikToks now. So it's like
yeah. I mean, there's, obviously every artist has, we don't know all the things that every artist is dealing with, but
right.
you did hit the nail on the head in that at a certain age, you're not driving the culture forward.
Right.
So you become what is called a legacy artist. Now, there's still a lot of value in legacy artists. Just ask the Rolling Stones.
Absolutely.
But the Rolling Stones are not innovating music today the way that they were, 30 years ago or 40 years ago. So yeah, I just think that that's a reality of life. I don't think that's just music either. But it is a reality of life. And so I think being prepared for that is just an intelligent thing to do.
Mm-hmm. And you're setting yourself up for that. You're already thinking about the future. So what goes into a plugin development? Are you developing it yourself? Are you hiring people to develop it, do the coding, and like what kind of goes into that?
That's a great question. So the first product that I launched, The Sauce, which came out in January of this year, that took me about 2 years to develop. But I will say it wasn't 2 years of pure development on that one plugin. It took 2 years to find the right team. I went through 2 different teams, and then I landed on a third person who has been an absolute legend in helping me get my ideas and making them tangible products. The idea for The Sauce was mine. All of the effects in it were mine. The workflow, the product concept and general design of it was all me. But I'm not a computer programmer or a software developer. I don't understand the mathematics of DSP algorithms, which now we're getting into the weeds. But using ones and zeros, computer binary to build a reverb that sounds natural is quite a difficult task. And so obviously it made sense for me to bring in somebody who understood taking my ideas and how to translate them into a physical or digital product. So of course I have a developer, I have a UI designer, but again, even on the UI, I have a new product coming out. This will actually be news. I have a new product coming out in the next month, and the UI design, I actually largely created the layout design, what buttons, where they are, what shape of them they are, and then I have a UI designer who enhances those ideas and then obviously creates like beautiful buttons and textures and colors and all that sort of stuff. So I certainly have a team around me, but I am really the driving force behind the creative vision for everything. Yeah.
And do you intend on taking these plugins like past just plugins? Like, do you want to grow this business past plugins and get into like maybe creating a specific DAW or anything else? Or do you just want to stay in the realm of plugins?
Interesting. I think to build a DAW would be that would be a lengthy process, and probably something that's doesn't quite interest me. You know, I think there's a lot. I use Pro Tools, I use Logic, I've used Ableton. There's a lot of great DAWs out there that these are large teams of developers who are innovating every single day. And I think that would probably be a fruitless effort in the end. So I think plugins are a good start for me. I might dig into instruments and actual sound design stuff. And of course, I also have sample packs. So I'm developing sample packs. So there is that's the bridge between going all the way to an instrument, but building sounds and allowing users to use those. So yeah, I mean, I don't know where it's all going to go, to be totally honest with you. I'm excited by it right now. And usually when I'm excited by something, the ideas just start to flow. And sometimes it takes time to really learn the business and navigate. And then as you navigate, you learn, and that learning helps you define what your next idea is going to be. So I'm excited, and I'm certainly going to build it. This is not a one-off. I do intend to grow it to a larger brand. But for now, it's sort of like whatever I feel like the next plugin I want to build, I'll just start building that.
Sure.
And so I actually have two products that, fingers crossed, the next one that's coming will almost for sure be ready in September. And the one after that, I'm hoping to have out this year. I don't want to give a date because there's still a lot of work to do on it, but fingers crossed by the end of the year, there'll be two additional software products. Yeah.
So how's the plugin business versus the music business? Like, what are some of the different things that you're like working in the music business, and the deals and stuff are much different than working in the plugin business? So what are some of the things that you've been able to pull over into the plugin business?
Well, I think good business just requires a self-awareness over your value, your worth, and what you're doing. And that really requires a level of honesty with yourself. And so I really try to take criticism. And I mean, the one beauty of working in music is there's no shortage of criticism at all. No. So if you become successful in music, by nature, you have developed a pretty thick skin. And that has certainly helped me in the business world, because if something doesn't go my way, I don't really sweat it too much, because, when one door closes, a window opens, right? So, I'm sure there's a number of lessons that I've learned in doing business and music that apply, but largely the business is fairly different. I mean, I'm dealing with distributors, for example, and I have to create marketing content. Actually, matter of fact, I guess all of that is very similar to music. However, the difference is, in music, I am largely a songwriter producer, so I'm working for an artist or a label. And so I don't really have to always think about, well, what's going to be the marketing plan to launch this album? And sometimes I do on certain artists who I work closely with. But for the most part, that's not my world. So, but I have learned that from managers and A&Rs and other talented people who I've worked around, and been able to sort of pull some of that and take some of those ideas and shift them into my own product and stuff like that. So there's definitely a few lessons for sure.
Well, speaking of lessons, you started the YouTube series now, where it's just the tips and story time.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about those and why? I mean, obviously you got such an incredible journey so far. So all of your information that you're sharing is incredibly helpful to somebody like me and younger who wants to, be the next DJ Swivel. Yeah. So tell us about that.
So, well, it really came as a need in my plugin business to create visibility. And I'm also connected to a lot of the other YouTubers, and I'm actually on this like mastermind chat that Game from Busyworks Beats he started, and I'm friends with him, and so I'm learning a lot from those guys in that world. And as you're putting product out, you really want to have a direct at least in my view, you want to have a direct connection to the customer. You want to be able to speak to them directly. This is something that I think a lot of plugin companies have missed the mark on. And one of the advantages I have is that there is a face to my brand, right? There is a track record. There's a pedigree to my brand. And so while that pedigree has always been there and the records that I've worked on sort of speak for themselves, surfacing that information to a customer is not everyone's going to know who DJ Swivel is. I recognize that. And so I felt like building a YouTube platform that would not only educate and share information, but also just share, interesting stories. This is where story time comes in, that I just think a general music audience would care about. And again, this is sort of just going, what I said earlier, one hand sort of washes the other. Building the YouTube helps drive plugin sales, also helps elevate my brand as a producer, which allows me to work on another hit record, which allows me to sell more plugins, and it's all interconnected, right? Mm-hmm. So that was sort of the process, and I just saw what other people were doing, and I felt like I could bring my own perspective. The other thing with music is there's no right or wrong answer, there's no singular answer. Everybody does things a little bit different, and some people do things identical, but even in the order of how they do things might be a little bit different. So I've just felt like the information that I have is worth sharing. And even if there's another YouTuber or another producer who's providing great content as well, it's not going to be exactly the same as me, because the way I mix a kick drum is going to be a little bit different than the way somebody else does. And that's what the beauty of music is. There is no right or wrong answer. It's all subjective, and it's all about what you resonate with and how you connect to the information, and then process it, and then you're going to come up with your own original version, maybe based on my influence. So I love that. I just think it's necessary to share that information, and I enjoy doing it. And I go back and speak at Full Sail all the time, kind of for the same reason. I think it's necessary for people in my position to share that information and pass that along. So I'm not really stingy when it comes to that. I give people my drums. I'm about to, by the time this airs, my session templates will be available on my website for free. And a lot of people are protective over that. I don't really care. I'm just like, here's the information. Go and make something great. Mm-hmm.
Plus, I always watch I was actually watching your mix session at Full Sail, the one that you did at Hall of Fame, I believe it was last year. And
was that the Lil Nas X one, or
no,
might
it was
have been BTS?
BTS. Euphoria.
Okay, Euphoria.
Yes.
Yep.
That track is just so incredible, but it's so simplistic. When you're breaking it down, it's like the chords are very simple. There's little things going on, but and you pack out those Full Sail sessions. Like, I feel like whenever you watch inside a huge track like that from somebody like you or Leslie or Phil Tan, it's like you're hitting a gold mine. Like, because there's so much to learn. Like, what plugins is he using? How is he doing that? And like you said, your mixing is very different than Leslie's, is very different than Phil Tan's. It's all so different. And I like that people like you and Leslie are so forthgiving with information and jumping on conversations like this to help me and other people to learn. Like, I don't believe in like gatekeeping in the music business. I don't like that. I don't like that. I'm always very forthgiving. Like, if I know something and you're coming to me and you need help, I'll do everything I can to give you the information I have to help you.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. Information is to be shared, period.
Yes.
And nobody is going to do things the same way. And that's why music is what it is. It's not math. There's not a fixed, finite, perfect answer. And so, I just think more and more people should share that information. I think those who don't might view it as like if I give away my secret sauce, nobody will hire me again. I just think I don't think anybody looks at it that way. So,
like you said, you're giving away your templates and you've given away your samples. Well, from just theoretically, it sounds like I could be the next DJ Swivel and literally copy you, but that's not how it's going to work. Like, your style is going to be very different than mine versus whoever. It's not how it works.
And a lot of it's just taste in music. Your ears are going to interpret a song differently than mine, which means your if your ears interpret it differently, then your brain is going to have to process that differently, and you're just going to take a completely different approach. So you might pull lessons and little key things that I do, but at the end of the day, every song is different. So how you approach that specific song is entirely up to how you feel in that moment. And so that's why I've never really had any concern over sharing, because everyone's going to do something a little new.
Yeah, and it comes down to like emotion and, you know, how your state of mind is, and like your room is obviously treated differently than my room. Like just little similarities like that and differences like that are going to make it completely different.
You could wake up on the wrong side of the bed one day, and you're going to mix the same song differently than you would if you woke up on the right side of the bed. You know, so I could mix the same song 5 times and I'll get 5 different results. That's the truth.
And that's the fun of music, because there's so many different things to tweak and different ways to maneuver things. So I want to get into that a little bit. So when you're producing and mixing, and you've been getting into doing a lot of that, what are some of the differences between working, like you do your own music now, and then you're also working a lot with like BTS and the Chainsmokers? Like how do you keep them separate, and how do you keep the sounds? Like, how do you maintain so many different sounds, even though they're the same, but they're different at the same time?
I don't really think of it that way.
Okay.
One of my strengths that I believe I have is that I've worked in all genres. So when I started in the industry, my first client was Fabulous. Mm-hmm. And so I really learned the hip hop world, and I worked with a ton of hip hop artists in New York. So, you know, Jay-Z and Ghostface and like Nelly and whatever. And a lot of that was working under my mentor Duro. And then, you know, I worked with Beyonce after that, and Beyonce brings a layer of, you know, urban music, but also a layer of pop music and R&B. And so it's slightly different, you know, and then Jay Sean is a good friend of mine. So then that's like just on the pure pop side. And then I started working with the Chainsmokers, and that's more on the EDM side and the pop side. And then it's just everybody, and then BTS. So everybody is, by being fairly diverse in who I've worked with, I've learned just so much from the other writers and producers and engineers and obviously the artists who I've been able to sort of share these records with. And, that's just allowed me to sort of process music a little bit differently. And so I don't really view shifting genres or shifting artists or anything like that as a challenge. Just the other day, I wrote a country song, and I've never really, I mean, I worked on Lil Nas X, but I don't know if I would call him a country artist. There's certainly some country influence, but he's not a country artist in my opinion. But at the end of the day, Candace and I, who's the writer who I signed, we just wrote a song. It wasn't about writing. We didn't even intend to write a country song. It just started to sound that way. And I said, why don't you sing the hook with a little bit of twang on your voice? Let me try some of these instruments, but it's still a typical pop arrangement, which I think most songs are nowadays. And it turned out great. It's one of my favorite songs that I've written in recent memory. So yeah, I just don't view them as separate. I feel like I can go in and work with a Beyonce one day, a Chainsmokers the next day, a Jay-Z the next day, and a BTS the day after that, and be able to navigate that fairly effortlessly at this point.
Sure. So you signed Candace, was it Candace Sosa?
Sosa, yeah.
Sosa, yeah. And she helped you write Euphoria, correct?
Yeah. So the song started with a demo that she did so she found me online. She actually saw a video of me breaking down my mix of Closer at Full Sail.
Oh, sure.
And she said, oh, I need to get this guy to mix this song. So she emailed me the demo and asked if I would mix it. And I listened to it, and it just wasn't there. It just wasn't right. It wasn't even worth mixing. It just was not polished enough. The production wasn't right. But the melody in the verse, the piano guitar in the intro, and that verse melody that was there. And I loved that. And I thought, wow, I can create a whole song around this. And so I said, why don't you send me the stems? I'm not going to try to mix your song. She didn't really have the budget to pay me anyways. So I said, why don't you give me the stems? I'll reproduce the song for you. And let's just see what happens. And so she did, and I did. And then so I basically stripped everything minus her guitar and piano and maybe a couple other smaller sounds. And then rewrote the hook, and built the whole production. And it turned into Euphoria. So, and then after that, we continued to write, and I just saw so much talent in her writing style, and her melodies just came so effortlessly and were always felt special to me. And so I decided, like, let's just make this official. Let's move you out of Detroit. She was actually in Troy, Michigan, so outside of Detroit. Let's get you to LA and let's work. And so I signed her to a publishing deal, and yeah, we've done quite well together, and she's by far my favorite person to write with, just because our ears just hear the same things, if so to speak. Like, anytime that there's something that I love, she usually loves it too, and vice versa. So, and then when we do have disagreements, it's fairly easy to get through. So,
And do you have any other writers, or is it just her?
It's Candace, and I have another artist named Arya, who's a rapper. He's not really a writer for other people, although we'll see. But he's an incredibly talented rapper, and I've signed him to publishing, and I'm developing him as an artist. And he's got a few songs that are out. He's got a few million songs with a million, 2 million, 3 million plays, and yeah, he's killing it. So his name's Arya, just Aria. And the biggest song right now is the Blue Chanel remix. So if somebody wants to look it up, it's always hard to search for Aria, because the first thing that pops up is Ariana Grande every time.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
So going back a little bit, I want to dig into like kind of growing up and getting into music, and kind of going
Sure.
back, getting a little history in that. So you were born in Toronto, right?
Yeah.
And then can you tell us how you got into music, and then how that transitioned into production, and then wanting to go to Full Sail and kind of all that stuff?
Sure. Well, the beauty of growing up in Canada, where did you grow up?
Minnesota. So basically Canada.
Okay, fair enough. Well, the one thing, Canada really emphasizes the arts in our government, just in where government spending goes. There's a lot of emphasis on arts, probably not as much as people would like, but there's never enough money for arts for anybody.
It's definitely more than the U.S. does.
Yeah, more than the U.S. I can say that for sure. And so my first experience with instruments and music was, I think I was in fourth grade. In fourth grade, my school gave me a violin, and they said, you're going to play violin. Well, actually, I chose violin rather. So I joined the string section in fourth grade, and I was horrible. And if you've ever heard a fourth grader play violin, it's basically just nails on a chalkboard. But that gave me an understanding of instruments and music and melody a little bit. And then the next year I joined band, and I started playing the trumpet. Same thing, wasn't great at that either, but I could play like Baba Black Sheep maybe, or something like that. Yeah, and so that gave me a little more insight into what music was. And then in 8th grade, I got a bass guitar, and that sort of opened up a world to me. And I joined a band, and we played like one gig at school, like just a school talent show thing. And that sort of opened up more doors. And the other thing is, all of my music teachers were always great. From 8th grade on, my favorite teachers were always my music teachers. And I don't know why this is. Probably because arts teachers just really love what they do. They're usually fairly passionate. Can't say the same for an English teacher. Yeah, so those teachers really nurtured my willingness to get into music. And so the way Full Sail came about is, in high school, I went to a computer high school. At the same time, I started learning how to DJ while I was in music class. And our music class, we had little MIDI keyboards and a little crappy studio. But that opened up this whole new window. Whereas before I thought to make a song with all these instruments, you had to be able to play all those instruments. I didn't realize that there was a thing called MIDI and a keyboard, and you could pull up these digital sounds that could recreate horns and strings and marimbas and anything else you wanted. So once I figured that out, then I was like, oh, I'm hooked. I love production, and I was DJing at the same time, and that was going well. I was playing nightclubs in Canada. And in my music class, I was given an assignment to look up post-high school music education schools. Just like look them up, and I had to do some sort of research paper on them. And one of the schools that I just looked up on the internet was Full Sail. And I remember seeing an article where I think like Jermaine Dupri, who, you know, huge producer and icon in music, he, I think, went down and spoke at Full Sail, and he pulled up in his Bentley and blah, blah, blah. And somebody wrote an article about this, and I was like, wow, that's cool. Like, I want to go to a school where I can hang out with like rappers and big producers who I look up to. And so I always had Full Sail in the back of my head. Fast forward, I graduate, I win the music award in high school. So at that point I knew. Also, I had a mom who was very supportive of whatever I wanted to do. She's like, I don't care. You want to be a garbage man? Just make sure you love it. And so I love music. She's like, go do music. I don't care. And so I Full Sail seemed out of reach. I went to a music program in London, Ontario, so 2 hours outside of Toronto. Didn't actually get into the music program the first year because it's a very small school. And then I didn't really like the regular general arts at that school. So I said, you know what? I'm just going to do Full Sail. I'd saved up some money. I told my mom, I'll pay every dollar I have in my bank account. I will pay. And she saw the enthusiasm there, and she agreed to help out. And yeah, and then I went to Full Sail, and the rest is history. And at that point, I had already moved to the US, and I said, well, I'm not going to go back to Toronto. There's nothing happening there. So I said, let me go to New York, and fingers crossed, I'll figure it out. And, you know, I did.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's kind of what the music industry is. You just kind of figure it out. You have a passion for it, and you throw yourself into situations, and you're like, I just know it. I just have this gut feeling. I just know this is the right thing. And you make it work.
Yeah. Well, one thing is I'm fortunate to have someone like my mom who was supportive and said, go after your dream. Not everybody is that fortunate, and I recognize that. And music is one of those businesses that if you want to get into it, you damn sure should not get into it for the money, because the vast majority of people in music are not Jay-Z. You know what I mean? That's the exception to the rule. And so you really have to love what you're doing. The amount of headaches and the struggle and the rejection and all the stuff that comes with working in music is really not worth it if you don't love the process. And fortunately, I love the process, and I was always encouraged to go after it. And I didn't give myself a plan B. I didn't have a second option. It was like, make it in music or nothing. And so that really forced me to find a way to make it, I guess. Mm-hmm. You know, sometimes that fire, if you have a little fire under your ass, it really pushes you to succeed and work just go that extra mile, put in that extra effort.
Mm-hmm. And I've heard that from numerous people is don't have a plan B, because if you do, you're going to fall back on it.
Yep.
And
it will feel way too easy to fall back on it.
Yes.
And that's like, you don't want to get into that habit of easy. Mm-mm. Life is not meant to be easy. If you want something special and you want to be exceptional, you really have to commit every waking moment that you have to it. It really has to feel like breathing. Like if I, held you underwater, you are going to fight to the death to make sure you can get that next breath of air. And that's kind of what's required to succeed in music. You really have to fight all the way through and never give up. So,
mm-hmm. So you had that passion, you found Full Sail. What advice do you have for those who are looking at going to Full Sail or Berkeley or any other music school? Like, what advice would you give to them?
Well, I get people asking me this all the time, and I think the most important thing is kind of like what I just said, is just give every every ounce of your being to that passion. If you give everything to that passion, you will do just fine. You will be successful, and I have no doubt with a little bit of self-awareness and just a general level of intelligence and common sense, that paired with an extremely high work ethic is going to make anybody successful. And so that's usually what I say is like, don't go thinking you're going to party and it's going to be easy and it's a music program. It's not as hard as like a biology degree. It is. And if you don't take it seriously, you will probably fail. So I say go to every class. I never missed a class when I went to Full Sail. Even when I was sick, I would show up. That's a horrible thing to say now, but there was no COVID then. So, but if I had a cold, I didn't care. I was showing up because I spent a lot of money on that education and I wanted to gain as much information as I could. Mm-hmm. And I made sure to study for my test. Yeah, I just made sure to take it seriously. And in doing that, it really helped build my passion even more than I had before. Like going through the process of learning, like really made me realize how badly I wanted it. And so I think if you get into a routine of giving everything to a goal, then that goal it becomes easy. And I found after the first few weeks of Full Sail, the rest was a breeze. I just breezed through it because I enjoyed it. Mm-hmm. I had fun.
Yeah. That's exactly my similar experience. I was doing close to 70 hours a week. I was involved in Spark and everything I could and soaked everything up. I was going to see events like when you came to speak and all that stuff. I soaked it all in, and that's the most important thing is any school is just go and make it worth it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
well, you're making it happen. So there you go.
Right.
Proof is in the pudding.
Proof is in the pudding. Like I never thought this interview would happen, and look, here we are sitting here. So going back a little bit, I want to talk about getting into you. You had your work with Duro, and then kind of shifted, and then you started picking up work with Beyonce and the Chainsmokers. How did that kind of evolve? And then getting on with BTS. Can you tell us those stories and how you kind of picked those gigs up?
Sure. So the Beyonce thing, okay, so I started interning for Duro, and he signed Fabulous. He's like the owner of Desert Storm Records alongside DJ Clue, and of course Fabulous is his artist. So Fabulous would come and work at Duro's studio. First I was a GA, and I would just get familiar with Fab. I'd be fetching him food and cleaning up the studio, and we might have a joke or two. And after a certain amount of time, there was a comfort level, and he asked me if I would help him record a mixtape. And so I did, and then that built our engineer-artist relationship. And I did 2 albums with him. The first one being From Nothing to Something, which I recorded the whole thing, and I mixed one song on it. And then Loso's Way, which I recorded the whole thing and co-mixed the whole thing with Duro. And then and I went on tour with him and did a couple mixtapes. And then after that, one day through Duro, or rather through Fab, I became friends with Lenny S. and Omar Grant. And Lenny S. is, I think, the vice president of Rock Nation. I mean, he manages Khaled and Fab and a ton of other people. And Jay-Z's he's very close with Jay-Z. And then Omar Grant, who was, I believe, the tour manager for Destiny's Child. And at the time, I want to say he was working at EMI. But he was in the publishing world. And so anyways, he called me one day, Omar, and said, hey, B needs a fill-in engineer for the day. Are you available? And I said, sure, of course I would do that. And so I went in, and eventually I built a relationship with B. And then she invited me to record her next album, which ended up becoming 4. And so that was how that happened. And then after I stopped working with B, after I finished that record, she went and had a baby and took 2 years off. And I had to really rethink what I was doing. And I had built up a steady flow of clients prior to working with her. But it wasn't any one regular client. So one day I'd be in 3 days with this artist, 2 days with this artist, 1 day with this artist, a week with this artist. There was always something new, and I was fairly busy. When I started working with her, her work ethic is unmatched. Nobody in music, I'm confident with this, nobody in music works as hard as Beyonce does. Point blank, period. And because of that, I had to now keep up with her. And that meant recording 13 days in a row, 16-hour days. And we did a 36-hour day. And the point being is all those other clients that I had prior to working with her, they had to find somebody else because I was pretty much on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for B. And so what happened was when B finished her album, all of those other clients that I had gone and found other engineers to work with. You know, they couldn't just sit and wait on me. And I understand that. And so by putting all my eggs in that one basket, it actually, I thought when I finished working with B, oh, everyone's going to call me and it'd be this big thing. And it actually was quite the opposite. Everybody who I had built relationships with had gone and found a replacement over that 18 months or whatever it was that I was kind of locked down. And so after B, there was actually, I had a dip in my career and I had to really rethink my approach on everything. And for about 2 years there, not much was going on at all. And it got very expensive to live in New York when you don't have a lot going on. So from that moment, I told myself, all right, now I'm going to build my reputation as a mix engineer. So I'm just going to mix everything for $100, $200. It doesn't matter. I'm going to mix everything. I'm going to build my name as a mix engineer the same way I did as a recording engineer 5 years earlier, 4 years earlier, whatever it was. And so I started doing that. And from that moment on, I said, I will never put all my eggs in one artist basket ever again. I'm never going to be exclusive to an artist. Nobody's going to, and I'm not going to be in a situation where I have to be locked in for a whole year and alienate anyone else. And from that moment, that's when I started building other businesses and doing other things that were music related. And that's where sort of Skio came about and Headliner and all these other things came from that need to diversify what I was doing. And it was a really important lesson. And I'm actually much like it was the best thing that could have happened to me because now I have so many different businesses and they all do fairly well. I never have to put my eggs in one basket anymore. And so it's allowed me to have more control over my days, more control over where I put my energy. And I also don't have any artist telling me what to do. Like I have to want to work on a project if I'm going to work on it. Nobody can just say, I need you here at this time. So it was a great lesson. And then anyways, so fast forward, the Chainsmoker thing was completely unrelated to Beyonce. That was just, I got an email. I actually tell the story in my next episode this Friday, there's an episode of Storytime about Jay-Z. 2 Fridays after that, I tell the story of how I connected with the Chainsmokers. And basically I got an email from their manager. I met with the boys. I liked their energy. I liked the music. And we just started working and built it from there. BTS, though, came from working with the Chainsmokers. They produced a song for BTS. I mixed that song. I built a relationship with the BTS team. And then I started sending them my own music. And then it resonated with them. And we got a bunch of cuts. So that was kind of the long-winded story of how I got from engineering to...
So you would say that a lot of your success is because you deviated and diversified yourself. And the importance of that is, like you said, don't alienate other people because you're locked into a project. It's best to diversify and really spend time on multiple different projects and having your hands in multiple. It's like the stock market. Like you don't throw all of your money at one stock. You got to diversify.
Exactly. Well, you can, but it's risky. It's risky. Now, if that stock is Tesla and it's going crazy, awesome. Good for you. But make sure you get out before it crashes. Otherwise, you're going to be left, stuck. And so, yeah, you're right. A more intelligent approach to the stock market is diversify. Make sure you have 10% here, 10% there, 10% across the full spectrum of whether it's equities or in this case, the music industry. And that means that if any one thing stops, for example, touring right now is stopped, well, if I had any part of my business that relied on touring, but I had other parts of my business that relied on just content generation or something else, I would be fine. So yeah, very important lesson.
So, what are some of the things that you're seeing? Are any of the artists that you're working with, are they doing anything for quarantine? Like any of the ones you're producing for or mixing for, are they doing anything that you're like, oh, that's a really cool idea? Like live streaming and things like that?
Well, I think one of the things that came out of quarantine that I love and I'm a huge fan of is Swiss Beats started that Versus. Have you seen Versus? It's on Instagram Live. Now they have Apple TV, and I think they're adding Spotify now.
Oh, wow.
And they basically get 2 artists or producers or songwriters. And the first one was Swiss and Timberland. And they battled. They each played 20 songs. They would go back and forth. And then people at home get to... they get a music lesson, right? They get to hear all the great music that these producers and artists and writers have created. And then also they get to keep score and they get to like argue over, no, like Swiss won this round. No, Tim won that round, blah, blah, blah. So I love that. I love what Swiss is doing with that. And I think that's going to grow. So as far as the process of making music, I think a lot of artists are actually making more music right now because they're not on the road. They're not able to tour. So they're just getting their head down and focused on creating music. So I think over the next year, we're going to see a lot of music come out. Everybody's sort of adjusting with the times. Right. Beyonce just put out, what is it? Was it Black is King? Is that what
I think so.
Yeah. And obviously that is, I don't know if she started working on that before everything that was going on, but clearly there is the tone has shifted in society with the resurgence of Black Lives Matter and now the entire world is behind it and really supporting it. And so obviously that is driving a lot of creativity for artists. And I think that's a beautiful thing. Mm-hmm. But as far as like innovating, I don't know. I think people are still trying to figure it out. One thing I would have loved to see, and it's not entirely music related, is I wish that a lot of the big films that were coming out, there was a vehicle to make those on demand. So I don't have to go to a theater. I want to see Tenet. I'll pay $30 to see it, but let me see it at home. And I think music will ultimately, there will be some innovation in music as well. But yeah, I don't know. Have you seen any?
The guy that I work for, Ari Herstand, I don't know if you've heard of him, but he owns a company called Ari's Take, and it's a music business education company. He's an author, and he started an online music festival where it was hosted it on Stage It and then switched to another platform, I believe. And that was one of like his first like go-to thing to kind of save all the venues and the artists and everything. I have a friend who is in sync licensing it's like his most successful that he's ever been in sync licensing. A lot of people are doing like Instagram lives but the thing of it is it's actually at work 2 weeks ago, last Saturday, for an artist that we're developing, we actually put on a drive-in concert out here in LA. So that was fun. But other than that, like it's staring at a screen is just too much. I think we're all tired of it.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny you say the drive-in concert and the Chainsmokers. I thought it was great. They tried to do it, but
I was going to ask you about it.
Obviously I wasn't there, but
right.
It's tough because people I think they feel trapped, especially young people feel trapped right now.
Yes.
And you feel like you're wasting your time away, and I get it. I mean, this is not comfortable for anybody.
No.
And then also you have the news reports where young people, it doesn't affect them and blah blah blah, and so it makes it very difficult to put on a show like that. And you're seeing with the Chainsmokers, it sort of didn't. The execution wasn't quite there. But it probably could have been done well, but it just maybe requires a little bit more scrutiny over the process. But But I think this is just a natural process. Like people are going to figure it out. And, you know, I've been watching the UFC fights. I don't know if you're a UFC fan at all, but they were the first to get the first sports league that I'm aware of to get back to it. And they've been very, very strict with how they're doing it. The NBA bubble is back. They're being very strict with how they're doing it. I think that's necessary. I think there is a way to do it. And I think there probably is a way to put on concerts. We just have to be extremely careful over the execution of it and how we are building it, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we had it where we actually had our venue cancel like 5 days before, so we had to scramble and we found another one, thankfully. But it was like everybody stayed in their cars, and if you did, they stood out on their hoods, and like the cars were a certain distance away. We tried to keep them, and we sold masks, so everybody got a branded mask, and it was like a very safe. Like everybody that was socializing, a couple friends that were like near each other, they were staying like 10 feet apart, and it was fun. And we actually had a food truck set up. We had to cut the food truck, and like there were just certain precautions that we took to ensure that it was as safe as possible.
So you did it right.
We did it right. But there was another artist in, was it Nashville or Tennessee, that Chase Rice or another artist that did one, and there was like no social distancing. There was nothing in place, and it.
Yeah, I mean, I just think the artists have to really. I mean, security can only do so much, right?
Right.
The artists really have to enforce it themselves.
Yes.
It's tough. I mean, it's tough for everybody. I don't think this is an easy time to navigate for any business. But businesses do have to continue. I mean, we can't have every business go bankrupt over the next year. And so, yeah, I think people are going to try to figure it out. And you know, I mean, I'm pretty much on Zoom at least once a day. Yeah. So that's like one of the things that have sort of come out of this is we're all now used to doing that. I have a friend who has a fairly successful quantum computing business in Vancouver. A couple friends who own it, and they found that they're actually more productive away from the office. Wow. And so I thought that was interesting. So I think we're going to see, as things do get back to normal over the next like 12 months, let's say, hopefully, I think we're going to see a lot of shifts in how business is done. And that's in the music business, and that's in all businesses. I think we're going to just see probably downsizing of corporate offices, not needing the same amount of space, allowing people to work from home. I'm very productive when I work from home because I'm pretty much working 24 hours a day, but also I can take breaks anytime I want. So I never feel burnt out. I don't feel confined to this like 9 to 5 schedule. And I think more and more businesses are going to see the value in that and the happiness that it brings to their employees. And as a byproduct of that happiness, you know, more productivity and hopefully a more successful business. So we'll see.
Yeah, I think it was Twitter that said this, that they're gonna allow their employees to work from home forever.
Yeah.
They're not working. So it's like it's already starting to happen. Yeah. And Google is like, they keep pushing it, you know, their return date back. Like it's now like December, and it was August, and then it was November, and now it's like January or something like that. But it's gonna hopefully keep happening. Where, like you said, we had an office too, and you know, since March we've been working from home, and I feel very productive because I can focus. I can take a break. If I have like an emergency or something I need to take care of, I can step out real quick and take care of it, or take a phone call or anything. Like I just feel more productive at home. I'm sure you do as well. Like there's just so many things that you have readily available at your disposal at home that you wouldn't have in an office.
Yep.
You know, so
mostly a bed.
Same. It's nice to be able to roll out of bed and like
exactly
right into your studio. But I'm sure, like for me, there's been times where I've struggled mentally and have had those down moments. Do you have those as well? And how do you get? Yeah. So what advice do you have for those that are kind of, how do you get through those?
You know, I'll be honest, today was one of those days actually. Sometimes, you know, things just aren't going your way. Today I was dealing with a bunch of technical issues and a bunch of stressful business things that I had to manage. And there was just a lot going on, and that stress builds up, and I found that, the way that I sort of solved it today was I just went into my room and laid down on my bed and just watch stupid YouTube videos. Like, just literally take my mind completely out of it and just have a moment to relax. Sometimes, like, our brains are working so quickly and working on overtime that you got to just give your brain time to just not think. And so that has been useful for me. I'm not one for like meditation or anything like that, but I have friends who are, and they find that they get a lot of value out of just like the mindfulness of like paying attention to your breathing and just being mindful of the body, which takes you out of like all the other stuff, the business, the work, the friendships, anything else like that. So yeah, that's what I do. I just try to take myself out of the studio and go do something else that is completely unrelated and blows off a little bit of steam, and then I can refocus. And so I did that a few hours ago, and that gave me the energy to like sit down and refocus and be able to have like a productive conversation with you even. So yeah, I think we all deal with it, and that's just how I deal with it.
Yeah, that was one thing. It's still something that I'm trying to figure out. Like, there's so much going on, and the craziness of the world, and can't be like, we're trying to plan family vacations, and we obviously can't do that because
that's a tough one.
Yeah, it's like I can't see my grandma and parents, and like it's tough. And I know at the beginning of quarantine, I created like this checklist. I'm like, oh, I'm going to be so productive. It's going to be like 3 months. I'm going to be the most productive I've ever been. And the first month or two I like, I rebuilt my website. I focused on my podcast and everything. And then I'm like, I got so overwhelmed. I'm like, I can't do this anymore. And I had to take a step back and just like, what am I doing? Like, my mental health and physical health is more important than this stupid checklist.
Super important. And I think a lot of, and this is not just music, but it's very easy in music to get caught up with whether it's the success or the momentum of building something and not giving yourself the time to just take a breath, take a break, relax for a little bit. And it's not just the internal pressure, it's a ton of outside pressure too. So, yeah, I just think more artists and producers and people who are busy like that need to just be mindful of it and be aware of it and just know, like, it's okay to take a break. It's okay. Taking a break is not stopping. It's recharging. And when you sort of frame it in your mind as a recharge and not I'm stopping, everyone's passing me, if you watch car racing, everybody's got a pit. Mm-hmm. It's okay to pit. Everyone's got a pit. Just how quickly you're able to do it and how efficiently you're able to like recharge and refuel. That's what's going to determine whether you go on and win the race or sit in the pit too long and fail. So I think everybody should be aware of that and just be mindful of it. That's it.
Yeah, and everybody has their own ways of dealing with it. Meditation, exercise, eating, whatever it may be, taking a break and recharging yourself.
I don't know how healthy the eating thing, especially in quarantine, that can quickly get out of hand. But yeah, everyone handles it differently. And I think if you do it in a productive and healthy way, all more power to you.
I guess it was more so like cooking. Like, I enjoy cooking. It doesn't mean I
do too, actually.
Like, I love cooking and like baking. I love doing stuff like that. So that helps.
I'll sit and go buy some nice steaks and just cook steaks.
Yes.
I'm like, this is great.
Yeah.
The end result is awesome. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite steak that you've had so far? Like, have you bought one that's just
I pretty much eat like I eat an insane amount of Wagyu, which is I'm sure not healthy at all. But I have there's a few butchers that I go to in LA, and I usually will buy like Australian Wagyu because it's more like a steak. But maybe once a month I'll buy like Japanese Wagyu, like an A5, and that's sort of like a treat, I guess. Yeah. But like, I don't really spend money on much. So I don't mind spending money on some like obscenely expensive steaks. I don't even own a car. So, like it's to me, like, yeah, like though that's just a way to like blow off some steam and enjoy your company with friends or whoever. And just the process of cooking is like sort of very relaxing for me. And I just happen to really like steak.
Yeah. Yeah. I love steak. I don't know.
I probably wouldn't be interested in.
Me neither. No,
more stressed than anything.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if I would buy Japanese Wagyu. Probably a little bit out of my price range, but I did find Costco has some pretty fire steaks. So
yeah?
I've been getting
Prime.
Those. Like Prime, it's like New York loin steaks. They're so good. So I've been feasting on those.
My favorite cut recently has been, I'll get like a whole Wagyu like picanha loin. Picanha is like I think it's like the small of the back. It's sort of like the back side of the strip. Like you have the strip and then at the end you get the picanha loin. And it's so tender and so much flavor. It's like one of my favorite things to do. And I've been like, I sous vide everything. So I'm like watching these YouTube videos of like people sous videing steak and stuff like that. Like this is how I like blow off steam and yeah.
Yeah.
Crack a bottle of wine, have a nice steak, and keep it simple. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you so much for your time. It's all the questions I have. We covered so much ground.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. You're a busy guy. I don't want to hold you for too much longer. But yeah, it's been an honor. I've, like I said, watched you and supported you since I attended Full Sail. So it's been,
thank you so much.
Since cool. And I'm going to continue to watch and draw inspiration from you. So
awesome. I appreciate that.
This was great. So last shout out, if you any links you want to shout out, or how can people keep up with you and follow you, all that fun stuff?
Yeah, it's pretty much at DJ Swivel on all social media. So Instagram, Twitter. I don't use Facebook all that much, but DJ Swivel on Facebook. My YouTube's just /DJ users /DJ Swivel. Yeah, and any, all my products are available on djswivel.com. So just go check it out. There's sample packs and there's also this Friday, my session templates will launch as well as a free sample pack. So there'll be some free stuff there for people just to get their hands in and mess around with.
Great. Yeah, and I'll put all that in the show notes as well for everybody.
Perfect.
So
awesome.
Great. Yeah. Thanks again for your time. And
thank you.
Yeah, I wish you well, and hopefully we can reconnect again.
Perfect. All right. Take care, Lennon.